He dons many hats. He is, of course, an architect, a prolific architect, but he is also an educator. He's someone who writes on architecture and urban issues. So he's also a theorist. He's an activist. Anyway, the list could go on, but I'm just going to stop now because I think I would take up all the time we have in sort of explaining his CV. And I think everyone would much rather hear him than hear me. So all I can say is that we're really lucky to have you, Rahul.
It's, of course, fantastic to see you, Rohan and Dirk and Marina, who I haven't seen in a long time, and Kazi, who I've been in touch with right through this. And, this was I've been in touch with Kazi. We've talked a lot about this, and it was a hard ask because, I said housing, my God, what do I speak on housing? Literally, and I say this with all sincerity, Dirk is the guru here. And a lot of stuff that, even in India, he and Rohan have spent a lot of their time. Dirk, you have to keep your mic off. I would right away say and be transparent that there isn't a coherent thesis that I'm proposing, because with housing, that's very difficult to do. If anything, housing, the debate is now more and more about pluralism and how we cannot universalize even our approaches to what housing means. Another very interesting project that came out of civil society was the Anandgram project. It was for puppet people who played and made puppets and performed with puppets, the Katpulli colony. And it was initiated by someone called Rajiv Sethi, who was a curator. He was not even an architect. He was a designer and a curator, or is. And he kind of had this amazing network internationally, and he tried to get Hassan Fatih to design it, and that was unsuccessful. And finally, Revati and Vasant Kamath, both of who passed away recently, were architects who were working with new experimental materials and things. They took it over as a challenge, and was a very interesting. So there's a great shift then in the kind of imagination of housing. These were built out of mud. They were organic in their form. They relied very much on the participation of the inhabitants. You can see they also had a core unit which could grow and expand. And so it kind of tried to, again, bring a humanity to it, make it human-centric, open up the questions of incrementalism, not rely on state patronage and the notion of absolutism in terms of absolute solutions. And then the Charles Correa project in Belapur, which I hope we have time to go back to, also sort of addressed those issues similarly in 1983. And Ariana by Doshi also addressed those issues. And what's interesting between both these projects is this one formulates itself on the regular grid and allows a lot of variation within the housing, whereas the Korea example actually experiments, with the aggregation in terms of cluster formation in very experimental ways.
This question, because of course, for some countries, it is very applicable, for example, for this type of cultural movements or religious movements even. But do you think this kind of concept should be taken into account when designing for the whole world, or is it actually more for what you called the South?
Majority.
No. So when a definition is human-centric, it opens up other questions. So in the global South or in the majority world, it is human-centric. Therefore, flux becomes exaggerated. Therefore, the movement of people and how you organize people in space, how do they share amenities, how do they move across the country at different seasons, all becomes very heightened. Which is not to say that the same issues are not valid for other parts of the world. Of course they are, but they play out in different extremities in the majority world. And therefore, if anywhere in the majority world, you can't avoid having that. Now, you can argue that, even on the streets of Manhattan, there are people who on the pavement put a sheet and sell you fake Prada bags. And when the police come, they pick up the bags and all run and disappear, right? That's the informal city. But it's 100 people. In Mumbai, it's 90% of the city, correct? So the inversion of the proportion is what makes you privilege those issues or approaches in a particular place more than the other. And therefore, their context matters. And context really matters. I think in all these discussions, context matters. I mean, you can't avoid that. Part of the problem of universalizing solutions is your discarding the idea of context, and that's very, very important.